It's Friday, March 27th, 2026. A couple of Marco Rubio mic drops, a Friday 5-pack, and Ask or Tell Me Anything next on the AM Update. Well, thanks for bearing with me yet again on another week on the AM Update. Sorry about yesterday morning's podcast issues. Been having issues with the publishing of this here pod for about 7 months. Yes, 7 months I've been having these issues. I've been having to stay up late at night just to make sure that this gets out to everyone for 7 months now. And finally, randomly this week, my podcast host finally confirmed, after not letting me know, but I just noticed it, it was working the way it was supposed to be working again, so I trusted it. My mistake. I trusted my podcast host to continue to make it work the way it was supposed to, and of course, the one time that I trusted it to do so, it messed up, but I'm being told that now it should be functioning the way it had functioned for 2 years into this. Enough about me and enough about my woes. Let's get to our Friday 5-pack. A couple of Marco Rubio mic drops. Here he is talking about our so-called NATO allies and their lack of action when it comes to the conflict in Iran.
It's in their interest. It's in their national interest.
Do you think President Trump criticizing NATO this morning, that sentiment?
I think he just made an observation, and the observation is that the United States is constantly being asked to help in a war, and we have more than any other country in the world, on a war that's happening in another continent, in Ukraine. But when the U.S. had a need, he didn't get proper positive responses. So right now he's just making the observation that, I think there was a couple of the leaders in Europe who said that this was not Europe's war. Well, Ukraine is not America's war, and yet we've contributed more to that fight than any other country in the world. So.
Yeah, exactly. When Russia allegedly came out a couple of weeks ago and said, no, we're not going to stop sharing intelligence with Iran until the United States stops sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Right or wrong, I'm not making a moral judgment about that. It's like, well, fair is fair. We're helping Russia's adversary. I wouldn't expect them just by the magnitude of their magnanimity, just stop sharing intelligence with Iran when we're sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Marco Rubio is making a similar point there. Why is Ukraine our war, yet we've contributed more than any other nation? And now European leaders are turning right around and saying, well, This is not our war. You guys can go alone. That wasn't the only mic drop that Marco Rubio made. Here he is at the most recent cabinet meeting yesterday as well, talking about the people of Iran.
The most important job any president has is to keep the American people safe. And every president says it, but we have a president that means it and does something about it. As the president outlined very clearly to the world on the night this operation began, Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years. For 47 years, Iran has been killing Americans and attacking Americans across this planet. And other presidents had an opportunity to do something about it. And they all warned about how Iran was dangerous, but they refused to act. And this president's not someone that's going to refuse to act. He's not going to leave a danger like this in place. He's going to address it, and that is what he is doing. From the very first night of this operation, the president made it very clear. People like this, and now what I'm talking about is not the people of Iran. The people that run this country are radical Shia clerics. These are religious fanatics. Look what they are doing now. At their weakest point, this is the weakest Iran has ever been, and look at what they're doing. They're attacking embassies. They're attacking hotels. Imagine what these people would do if they had a nuclear weapon. That is an unacceptable risk for the world. By the way, the president's not just doing a favor to the United States and to our people. This is for the world. He defined very clearly on the first night of this operation what the goal was. We were going to destroy Iran's navy, and that is happening. We were going to, if it hasn't already happened, I'll let Pete speak to the specifics of it. We were going to destroy their missile launching capabilities. We're well on our way to achieving that goal. We were going to destroy the factories so they couldn't make more missiles and more drones, and that is moving forward. Every single objective the president clearly laid out on the first night of this operation is being effectuated. Again, Pete will speak to the specifics of it. This has been an incredibly successful operation.
Strong defense there from Secretary of State Marco Rubio of Operation Epic Fury. Again, whether or not this actually works out in the Americans' best interest, that remains to be seen, and we might not have the fullest picture of that for years down the road. If it is not working out in America's interests, we will be able to see the effects of that, I think, a lot more quickly. We turn now to President Trump himself, who at that very same cabinet meeting outlined one specific facet of the domestic agenda, stopping the flow of illicit drugs into the country.
Mind droppers. By the way, speaking of drugs, we're 98% down drugs coming in by water, by the ocean, by the sea. 98%. And we're trying to find out who are the 2% because we think they're the bravest men anywhere in the world.
Well, the mass deportation, or at least the deportation, maybe not mass, but the deportation campaign may not be going fast enough, but it is going. According to the New York Times, from U.S. Census Bureau data, these major metropolitan areas saw a decrease, and a pretty marked decrease, in net immigration. We'll just start west to east. Seattle, negative 31% net migration. Los Angeles, negative 67%. Denver, negative 72%. El Paso, negative 95% net migration. Dallas, negative 52%. Chicago, negative 62%. New York City, negative 65%. Washington, D.C., negative 44%. And Miami, a 32% decrease in net immigration. That all can't just be attributed to intra-migration, migration in between the states. That does indicate that the deportation campaign, maybe not a mass deportation campaign, but the deportation campaign is indeed working. You know, something else that seems to be working, sicking Immigration and Customs Enforcement to the airports, helping TSA agents and their understaffing issues thanks to the DHS Democrat shutdown. How about this, though? You've seen maybe videos of ICE agents unmasked in airports, passing out water bottles to travelers, waiting in those long lines. You may have seen some other videos as well of individuals, just travelers, coming up and saying hello to ICE agents. In addition to them actually helping TSA agents get those lines moving faster, this seems to be a pretty big PR win for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And included in that PR win is this story. According to a DHS statement, and there is video of this, on March 25th, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent helping to support Transportation Security Administration operations at JFK International Airport in New York jumped into action to help save the life of a 1-year-old child experiencing a medical emergency. The heroic actions of this officer began when a 1-year-old child became unresponsive in the arms of his father, unable to breathe for almost 2 minutes. CCTV review shows a passenger in a TSA pre-check line holding his 1-year-old in his arms when the child's arms go lifeless. Panic ensues, and the father is seen scrambling around the area, calling for help. The agent working at his post heard the screams from the father and the other passengers and sprinted to the scene. The father handed the child to the officer, who then assisted the unresponsive child and began performing the Heimlich maneuver. A few seconds later, the child started breathing again. EMS personnel arrived on scene with medical equipment to further monitor and reassess the child. The child was reassessed and determined to be healthy enough to fly. Amazing. Heroic actions from that ICE agent stationed in the airport, probably somewhere he maybe didn't think he'd be a couple of weeks ago. Maybe didn't think a couple of days ago he'd be doing anything other than helping people get through the lines, and he ends up saving a 1-year-old's life. How about this? After much controversy the last few years, the elite levels of sports may be making a return to sanity, in a major win for women's sports and sanity. The International Olympic Committee issued a new policy this week effectively banning so-called trans-identifying athletes from competing in the category that aligns with their quote-unquote gender identity, though not from competing in the category that aligns with their biology. The IOC echoed two conclusions that many conservative activists have been saying for years, quote, this is according to the IOC, male sex confers performance advantage in all sports and events that rely on strength, power, and or endurance, and to protect fairness in such sports and events, as well as safety, particularly in contact sports like combat, collision, and projectile sports, it is necessary and adequate to base eligibility for competition on biological sex. Took them long enough, but the International Olympic Committee is finally returning to sanity. One person that I think could return the realm of college football back to some form of sanity is national championship winning head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers, Curt Cignetti. He's got a new transfer, a star wide receiver formerly from Michigan State, who Cignetti says showed up to practice with some interesting kicks, spring practice.
I didn't love those gold shoes he came out in today. you learn what getting your ass ripped is all about. I don't know if that happened in very often Michigan State. That was before practice started. That was a wake-up.
There is Curt Cignetti ripping his new wide receiver, Nick Marsh, who was a star wide receiver for Michigan State, for showing up to the first spring practice in gold cleats. Good for Curt Cignetti. He is the rising star, probably, in college football. When we come back, it'll be time for Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's coming up next. Ask or Tell Me Anything, your chance to ask me any question. Tell me any news story you think needs covered on the AM Update. We go to Alberta, where Conan wants us to know about a new effort in Canada to confiscate weapons, rifles. He says, quote, Canadians are holding the line and not participating, but the legal buyback registration ends March 31st and the amnesty for criminalizing gun owners ends October 31st. Please help our voices be heard on this issue. According to Conan and other sources, there is some sort of gun, similar to what Australia, I think, tried to do and did very successfully. There's some sort of gun buyback program that is, quote unquote, that is wink, wink, opt in. It's really just a confiscation program. According to Michael Tomlinson, also in Canada, that liberal gun confiscation effort is running at 2% compliance. The deadline for the buyback program is March 31st. And only 2% of Canadians, at least 2% of Canadians are complying. Now, you might be criminalized, according to Conan, if you don't turn in your guns by October 31st. So that is something to keep an eye on. I had no idea about that. That's the first time that I'd heard of it. So, Conan, thanks for letting us know. James says, do you think it's a coincidence that right after Jordan Peterson launched his alternative education initiative, he became seriously ill, and his daughter's family also dealt with the child getting super sick too? I find myself wondering if there's a spiritual component to it. Absolutely, I think sickness can be spiritual. And real physical maladies like cancer or otherwise can be absolutely a measure of spiritual warfare, but I think it cuts both ways as well. Cecile Richards, the longtime president of Planned Parenthood, she suffered from and died from one of the most excruciating forms of cancer, brain cancer. I sometimes think that this cuts both ways. Sometimes these sicknesses can be judgments of God. Sometimes the sicknesses can be indicative of spiritual attacks. So I kind of hold that in an open hand. I don't hold to that with a ton of dogma, but I understand what you're saying, James. Like the Dark says, it's often harder to build unity around shared beliefs, but easier to unite around a common enemy. Then for Christians, why wouldn't that enemy simply be Satan? Because we're afraid of letting the lion out of its cage. That's why. Because too many people who claim the name of Christ don't even want to admit that evil exists. It's quite a simple answer. Bob says, why do you think the Senate Republicans are not passing the Save America Act and a ton of other bills that would help secure our country? Because they don't want to. They don't want to, Bob. They don't want to. They don't like you. They don't like me, most of them. They don't want to secure the borders because that maybe hurts their bottom line some way, somehow. Their donors on K Street. They just don't want to. That's why. They lack the political will. And until we possess the political will to back them into a corner and to really make them pay prices and to really start to act like citizens and think for ourselves instead of what's on the television, and I'm talking corporately, not this audience, but corporately. Instead of just being easily manipulated by whoever controls the most dollars and whoever has the highest name ID, until we actually return to being a real citizenry instead of just a tax farm, that's what we're going to continue to get. Goyne Coastal says, is the root of Candace evil the sin of lust? Did she lust after Charlie and get rejected? Then when he was assassinated, she rages against Erica as one of the ones who cheated her from her objective of lust. It could be that. I think there's some component of that, whether it's professional jealousy or whether it's romantic. At some point in time, maybe she had a crush on Charlie. I'm sure that maybe is the root of all of this. I don't know why you would go so hard after Erica if there wasn't some degree of jealousy one way or another. I think now it's just psychotic, demonically inspired BS now. Retardation. Let's go to Sean Lulofs, who says, I'm finally seeing one of your posts in my feed. Well, thank you, Sean. Part of it is my fault. I should be posting more often from Real AM Update. I've got a lot of stuff. Got a big project that I'm working on outside of this project and outside of my day job as well. That is eating up what little time I have. But I should be posting more often. Thank you for your questions, your submissions for Ask or Tell Me Anything. Thanks again for listening to this week's AM Update. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Back at it again on Monday.